Welcome to Chop Shop Motors. My name is Clay, and we're going to look at another segment of the 30-day truck build. Got some parts, and I'm excited to share kind of how we're going to blend some that I had with some that I brought down from the other shop, and maybe if I can sneak it in, I'll even get them put on today. There's a pretty long list, or there's a list of household chores that need to happen, so might not get quite as much time on the truck project. I did have a question come in on one of the previous segments around fenders and kind of fit and what the interchange is. And so I thought I'd give you a little bit of a more in-depth answer to that around the question was really around, interchange with F250 fenders on the front and F100 fenders on the front of a 53 to 6 Ford truck. And it's a great question because you come across lots of opportunities now where people are taking big trucks, F500s and F350s and bigger, and they're taking the cabs. They're finding these old farm trucks and construction trucks that are pretty much, there's really not much you can do with them anymore. They're too worn out, or just don't really work as well as a late model truck for doing work. And so they're selling the cabs and the grills and the hoods and the front ends, and they're finding new life in the hot rod space. So absolutely a great option. I saw one locally, an F350 that had a custom cab on it. So it had the stainless, it had dual door locks. It was super nice. The cab was really nice. Came with a Y block that probably didn't run, that had a set of Offenhauser valve covers on it, and I think the guy wanted $1,000 for the whole deal. And it was local, so there wouldn't be any shipping. And you think, well, that's a lot of money, and it is, but a nice cab is probably worth $1,000 by itself if it's really nice with doors. And this was all there cab wise, and then it had $400 worth of valve covers. So the drag is that you would have had to part it out and deal with the frame, and it didn't have a title, so that wasn't going to do you much good. But bottom line, lots of people are saving that stuff that way. So back to the question. The question was whether the front fenders would interchange and be the same, and so the response is yes. And I did a little research after I answered and looked exactly at what the interchange was in my parts book. So it's hard to find information on interchange for those kinds of things on the internet. The material is sporadic and sometimes inaccurate, but I do have 1955 Ford chassis and body book for these trucks, so it makes it where you can go back to really the source and see what the part numbers were and what the interchange was. So just to bottom line it, front fenders on an F100 are the same for an F250 as long as the truck came with 16-inch wheels. So what that means is, more than likely if it was a F250, a 3/4 ton truck with your typical 8-lug 16-inch wheels, like 95% of them were, fenders are the same. On our truck that we shortened into a short bed, that's exactly the case. It was 16-inch wheels, still have them, easy to confirm the source, and fender dimensions are the same, direct interchange. If you have one of those F250s that happen to have 17-inch wheels, so it was on a truck that maybe had dual rear wheel on the rear axle, and it had the window type wheel on the front, is I think what it looked like, in a different front hub, then those front fenders would be the same as an F350, which means the wheel opening was bigger. So if you're looking at an F250 and F100, 95% chance fenders are going to be the same. Rare case double wheeled rear axle F250 and 350, that wheel opening does get bigger, and so those aren't going to work for you unless that isn't your concern. Like, you don't care if the wheel opening is a little bigger and you're going to do something different with them anyway, then at least you know what you're starting with. So that's the answer to that in a little more depth. Looking at the parts I brought down yesterday, we have 2 front drums which are usable, some shoes, some hardware, some backing plates. What I'm going to do is let you look over my shoulder while I figure out what parts I want to mix from what I just acquired out of inventory and what I had down here in Phoenix, and kind of lay out what the front brake setup's going to look like to put on this truck. So let's get to it. So here is what we have. We have a front drum, front drum is nice. It's definitely going to work for our purposes. So 1 front drum. Here's the other front drum. Super nice shape. Couldn't ask for better drums. So really a nice win in that space. These came with pickup I had, bought that had disc brakes on it, and they threw the remnants in with it from the changeover. So we're going to put them to good use. Here are the backing plates, which really what this yields us is, it yields us a set of shoes, adjuster, and springs. So this backing plate doesn't yield us anything, but we are going to, well, we'll leave the hoses on it. So we do end up getting a couple wheel cylinders if the 2 that I built end up not being savable. So they were put together, they're all ready to bolt in, but if they leak and there was a pit I missed, we can always build these. So I'm going to set this backing plate aside. And I'll set these 2 drums aside. And then I have the pieces that came off of the miscellaneous parts of the parts front axle and the whatever was left on the truck that I pulled these parts off of. So we have an adjuster, we've got 2 adjusters, some springs, some hardware. So basically we should have enough to put this all together. So this would have been short shoe toward the front, so this would have been the left front. So I need some parts for the right side. So these are the shoes. I got some hardware, some Grody hardware. These are the shoes that were on that truck and had the drum on it. So we'll utilize those for this exercise. So we've got shoes. Then we need an adjuster. Could be a little tricky because that adjuster is pretty, well, they both, let's see, this adjuster, so the adjusters are left and right. So let's see if we can get one to move and see if we can figure out which one it is. Okay, well, we're going to probably have to put some heat on those to get those apart. See if the other one does come apart. These look like they were underwater, so that doesn't bode well for the ease of getting them apart. Nope. Okay, so we'll put some heat on those and see if we can get either of those to move, because I'm going to need one to play with this truck. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. So the spring kits are different between what's on this backing plate and what I have to pick. So I'm going to need one of those, one of these guys that goes between the shoe and the spring, keeps the shoe aligned on the pivot, and then it's going to use one of these big springs for the lower, and then we're going to use the best of these two kits for the upper. Again, a little bit different, but I think they'll be all right. Then we're going to need two of these guys and the retainers and pins for those. Okay, so that is the extent of what I'm going to need from this hardware. Put the remnants back in. Okay, so we've got some shoes, we've got some hardware, all look pretty gross. Let's pull this hardware off. Okay, pop that off. Got this little plate in there. Got the adjuster and the spring. Good. Got this little guy right here that went below this on one side. We'll pull the two pins out and set those aside. And that's all we're going to need from this, so we'll set this aside. Those backing plates will end up getting used on yet some other project. So next step, I need to clean up some of this stuff that looks horrible and get one of these loose. So let me do that and I'll bring you back. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going to heat this cylinder up. And we probably could do this a couple different ways. I'm going to heat this end up, and then I'm going to flip it around in the vise, and I'm going to drop it into, put this shoulder piece that I'm heating up into the jaws, and then I'll see if I can break it loose. And the reason I'm doing that is I don't want to get the torch on the jaws of the vise directly. I don't want to heat up the jaws. I don't want to get that much heat into the vise. And also, I don't want the vise to act like a heat sink and pull all the heat I'm taking that's going into the sleeve out of it. It's a lot of work to save a little goofy little adjuster, but that's probably the nature of the beast, as I've explained before. I'm going to try this just to see if... Okay, so this is going to turn on here, which is good. So that gets that out of the way. Okay, so... It gets a little tricky when you don't have a person to help you here. Okay. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this the way I want to do it. It's definitely hot. Okay, so this came out. Go ahead and get it all the way out while it's warm, because sometimes once it cools it'll go back in. So the oil burning off my glove. This bolt is pretty warm, the star adjuster, so okay, we could probably long, that's for sure. Okay, double that on the floor, burning up the carpet. All right. Right, one down. Let's go ahead and do this other one while we're at it. This one's actually worse. It's much grodier, much more rusted. See if that back sleeve starts to turn a little bit. This one's definitely had some water sitting on it for quite a while. This may not be the success that the other one was. It's amazing what heat will do, though. Heat is certainly a great vehicle to get stuff broken loose, especially when it's been rusted on for a number of years. Okay. Okay, one problem still exists, and that is this other end, which I might have it locked down with the vise, but the other end still has the little nub with this slot in it that locks into the chute. It doesn't thread on anything, it just sits on a post, but it is locked on there right now. Okay. Well, let's see. I'm not sure what other options we have here. So let's see if we can just kind of break that loose. Sorry, I'm kind of mumbling to myself. I'm thinking through how to do this and filming at the same time. Kind of shoot yourself in the foot when you tighten up the vise. It tightens up that sleeve, and so that's a problem. The other piece is you don't want to rough up this star washer because you're going to need it. All those little serrations around it looks like a gear. That's actually what you hook with your adjuster to adjust the brake shoe. So you don't really want to have that mangled. Okay, let's heat that up. I didn't think the screw, that sleeve that's threaded, was actually going to come off that easy. That was a surprise. Sometimes they have a hole in the very end of this little adjuster that you can weep lubricant down to get it broken loose, but not in this case. Okay. Should have turned off the assembler first. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So that piece is loose. All these pieces are loose now. I can lube them up and have a little better chance of making them work. So I'll take all those pieces, I'll clean them up, I'll figure out which one I need, which side, and then I'll have all the brake parts ready to go back together. Brake shoes are used, hardware is cleaned up, pulled it from at least two different piles of parts, and we have some drums that are really good. So I think everything's going to be work fine. I've got new hoses, and I've got new, rebuilt master cylinder, but also rebuilt wheel cylinders. The one area I'm going to have a little bit of an issue with is the brake lines on an F250 are dimensionally the next size up, and so we're going to have to get some fittings to reduce down some of our lines and make all that work. So that's, you know, that's one of the pieces that is different between the two trucks that is going to hamper us just a little bit as I done up some fittings. But other than that, I think we're going to be good. So let's put some pieces together and at least get that front end all bolted up and done. 10 trips later, maybe we have enough stuff. Probably not. Okay, lug nuts are off. Wheel bearings already been packed. We probably need to blow out that brake line while I'm thinking about it. The part that's amazing is just how many tools it takes, how many trips in the toolbox you have. Okay, that's blown out. Wheel cylinder hose goes to the back. That's accurate. Yep. So the hose comes out at an angle, it goes towards the back of the vehicle, so we'll put it on just like that. I had marked them, which is great, and I also have a truck next door, right next to us, parked, that happened to still have wheel cylinders. Okay, so wheel cylinders there. Let's tighten those up. Well, wheel cylinder is there. Okay. Cool. One more thing that's put in place. Okay, got a couple new hoses. One thing you want to make sure you do, because they don't come with them, is make sure you get your copper washer and install that on there before you put it into the wheel cylinder. So if you're doing this and you're building it with all new stuff, you may buy wheel cylinders and you may buy hoses, but these copper washers you might not have, so don't neglect those. Run to a Napa or a suitable parts store and pick those up. Okay, then we'll put this into the frame and that gets it out of the way. It uses a funny nut and washer that I pulled off of the old brake line. Mainly you just want it out of the way so that it can't get grabbed by the front suspension when it's turning and things like that. So that piece is on. That's a little overkill. In later vehicles, they just use a big clip that kind of holds that hose in place. But on these earlier ones, they went through the effort to actually put a big washer and a nut and everything to hold that line up. So that is that's the way it is. Okay, I am going to just kind of looking this hub over. I'm going to take a wire brush to this flange real quick, just because it doesn't look super smooth. So let's just, not really a big issue. Okay. It's not a big issue and it doesn't take much time. It's just a little easier to kind of clean it up a little bit. And before we put the shoes on. Right. Okay, adjuster hole is in the front of the backing plate. That aligns with where our star is, so we're correct there. Short shoe, one shoe shorter than the other. Short shoe always goes to the front on self-energizing brakes, so that is correct. Everybody does it kind of their own way. I prefer to put the bottom spring on while the shoes are off. It's a bit easier to fight than to try to do it when all the springs are on and you're trying to get it to connect from one shoe to the other. This is a little bit easier, I found. So this one had two different types of shoe retainers, so I'm just making sure I'm putting the right pieces together with the right pieces. It's not a super critical item, it's just it's critical in that you want it. It's not critical what style you use. Okay. Side. Those pieces are there. We'll put this on. That's what keeps the shoes from flexing out. We have two different length springs. One was on the shorter hole, so we'll reassemble it the same way. One was on the longer hole, meaning farther from the pivot. This is a little bit longer spring as well. Okay. Everything is as it should be. Right, let's get a brake drum. But they've been moved around, sitting around, had some grease in there, so we'll get those cleaned up. Alright, okay, got a lot of gets just a little bit easier with the tool, so we'll use the tool. So these are not self-adjusting, so they don't have the mechanism that regulates the star. So if they're not adjusted when you put them together like this, they're never going to be adjusted until you go under the truck and adjust them. So you want to get them as close as possible now. Then after we drive it, optimistic thought, but after we drive it, then we'll do it some more. Jack it up, adjust the wheels again, and if everything's in good working order, these trucks actually stop decent. So I mean, are they going to stop like that, you know, late model F150? No, but well, they'll stop good enough. So it's getting closer, starting to have a little drag on it. You have to realize that the shoes are kind of finding out where the center of the drum is too. So don't assume that just because there's a little drag that they're all done. Okay, so now we're getting pretty close. So you want to have a little drag on it. That's probably good enough for what we're going to do. And then after I drive it, I will jack it up and adjust them one more time to make sure everything's good. So basically what we've accomplished here is we've got all the brakes back together, hoses on, wheel cylinders in, a really nice brake drums on. This corner, other than changing that fitting and putting the line on, this corner is done from a brakes perspective. So let's put this wheel back on and we'll go do the other side. So because this hub had been off and rusty, I just wanted to get a really good feel that those lug nuts were tightened down on those old studs. So I wouldn't usually probably hit them quite that hard with an impact, but I don't want it to just be bound up on a little bit of rust or whatnot. Okay, so that's on. We need to put a hubcap on this wheel. This hubcap probably exceeds the rest of the build, but it's the only other hubcap I have. I lied. It didn't exceed it. It was bent. So that was a swap meet. I bought 3 of these hubcaps swap meet. My gut feeling is that these are aftermarket, probably Taiwanese hubcaps. The inside's way flimsy. I've got 3 other caps on the truck that are original Ford, and they're beat to death, and they don't have any of that flex in there. So no more commentary on import crop. All right, let's do the other side. This hubcap isn't quite as shiny as that other one. Well, it's probably shiny, but it does have some rust. But on the inside, you can tell this was an original Ford one. The inside of this is a lot beefier. It doesn't distort and, you know, move all out of the way every time you pop it off, because it's just made out of probably both better metal and heavier metal. But, you know, if you're making this stuff in Taiwan, it doesn't have to be any good. We're stupid enough to buy it, so there we go. All right, still feels a little tight. Just loosen that up just a little bit more. Okay, better. All right, hopefully you can see that. That puts the front brakes back together. Everything's done up here other than 2 little fittings, and it's just another thing that's checked off. Again, nothing super exotic, pretty straightforward stuff. Anybody can do it in their driveway, and we're on to the next piece. I'm Clay for Chop Shop Motors. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next project.